Shabbat Shalom. In 1906, Sir Francis Galton visited a livestock fair in England. It's going to be relevant, I promise. At this fair, he witnessed a contest in which people could enter and guess the weight of a particular cow. And over 800 people entered this contest, and Sir Francis Galton was able to look and see all of the entries afterwards. And as he looked and compiled all of the data, he saw that while no one person actually got to the pound the weight of the cow, if you took the median of all of the guesses, the median was only 9 pounds off. And the mean was precisely accurate at the weight of the cow. And he came away from this and he wrote an essay called Wisdom in Crowds. And it teaches us that there are times when the individual needs to rely perhaps on the group for wisdom. And that together we might know a little bit more than any one of us alone. And the same message appears in this week's Parsha. And the advice comes from an unlikely source. Yitro, Moshe's father-in-law, the high priest of Midian. He shows up after the Exodus. They've gotten out of Egypt. The Israelites are all there. And Yitro comes and pays a visit. And he looks and he sees Moshe's day. And the Torah tells us that Moses spent all day, every day, sitting in judgment over all of the people. He would sit, and they would come, and they would bring case after case after case, and he would decide. And Yitro says, Moses, you can't do this. This has got to stop. But even more strongly than that, it says that Yitro says, Moshe, that it was ra. It's bad what you are doing. So the question is, what was so bad? What was so bad about it? Now we've learned, the Orach Chaim tells us the reason why this story shows up is to teach us that advice can come from anywhere, even from someone's father-in-law. There can be good advice. To my father-in-law who always watches on live stream, I love you, Eric. But this advice can come from anywhere. The question now is why? What was Moshe doing that was so bad? Now, businessmen or women in the room, you might say to me, well, this is against Kovi, right? He's not synergizing. This is just a bad way to run an organization. The person at the top can't be doing everything. You have to delegate. And that's true. That's very true. But I'm not sure that the Torah cares. In many places, it cares about how we do our business. But Abarbanel, one of our classic commentaries, points out that if it were that simple, surely a great leader like Moshe would know. He would be doing it already. So the rabbis in the Talmud come and they say, no. The problem with what Moshe was doing was specifically that he was alone. And the rabbis use this scene as an example to say that anyone who studies Torah by themselves, not only is it wrong, but actually they become less intelligent. Learning alone makes you less intelligent. And that was Moshe's problem here. And that the lesson then becomes one about not efficiency, but setting up magistrates of other jobs is to tell us that the more voices in leadership, the more voices of the people, the more robust the Torah will become. So perhaps it was lack of organizational optimization. Perhaps it was a lack of pluralism or plurality of scholars, or perhaps Yitro's rebuke of Moshe has to do with Moshe's ego. In insisting that he judge every single case, Moses was essentially saying that he was irreplaceable. No one else in Israel was capable of adjudicating. And he is maintaining himself as the absolutely indispensable voice of God and leadership amongst the people. And this might very well be said to be ra'ah, to be bad, not just because it's unsustainable and because it simply isn't true. We'll see later in the book of Bamidbar that there are others with divine inspiration that spread God's word within the Israelites, and that Moshe himself, after learning this lesson, even declares that it's a good thing. And he says in there that he wishes everyone else had that inspiration and could preach and teach the words of God. Now, Moses' ego here it's a different, a special kind, and perhaps one of the most insidious. He was known as a humble man. Moshe was Ishanav Me'od, of the whole world. And so perhaps he himself had no idea what he was doing. He thought even perhaps that he was sacrificing himself, working himself into exhaustion for his people, this ultimate sacrifice. But really, he was perhaps inadvertently maintaining his central role. The ultimate sacrifice, and what would have been best for the people, is if he had removed himself, or at least lessened himself, and spread authority around. And this, again, not to go back to our modern examples of corporations or anyone, this is something that we see in our world today. How better it would be if people could lessen their own ego just a little bit and help spread authority and power around. This example is given to us by no less a figure than God. When God created the world, the Kabbalists tell us God had to tzimtzum. God had to withdraw God's self from the world so that there was a space for creation to happen. And this is something that the Hasidim tell us is our goal for all of us all time. Bitul hayesh, the annulment of ourselves, Rabbi Nachman says, is the only way that we are able to tap into the soul of the world, the collectivity, those around us. Because what did Moses learn in this parsha? Moshe learned that he had to reduce his own ego just a little bit for the betterment of the people, for something that he loved and cared about. And there are things in our world, for each and every one of us, that we care about so much, they are more important than ourselves. And this is a lesson that was brought home to me 3 weeks ago, like gangbusters. I mean, of course, guys, I have to mention my newborn son, Aldo, who I think I saw around here in the back somewhere. This is the first time you're being used in a sermon, and I promise it's not the last. But I was struck almost immediately by how quickly my own sense of self was subsumed by the needs of my family. Every day that I see Rabbi Cosgrove, he says to me, "How's Aldo? How's Aldo?" And he says, and I say, "Oh, he's fine, thank God, he's fine." And eventually Rabbi Cosgrove said, "Yeah, you don't matter anymore. No one cares about you. They just want to know how Aldo is." And that's fine, because he's way cuter than I could ever be. But it has been amazing to me how much the label Abba has taken control over everything else, and how willing I am to just give up whatever else used to make me me in favor of that. And yet, as I give up what was once a part of my selfhood, it was so willingly for the betterment of my own life, I do note a little bit of a loss. But this is an important loss, I think, this diminishing of our own ego, whether it's for the people, for a family, for something you care about. This is a lesson that is important to Moshe and the Torah, and it could not be more important now. Whether we're thinking about politics, religion, our friends, wherever we are, to the business, the lessening of ourself, the giving up a little bit of what makes us us, in order to make sure that what we love and care about is sustainable and thrives, is important. Chancellor Eisen, in his book, The Jew Within, talks about the trends in modern religion of what he calls Sheilaism. Sheila was someone he interviewed who basically said that anything religious only matters if it is important to Sheila. And that is it. And Chancellor Eisen, in his book, calls on Judaism to be, in some sense, countercultural, subversive, to say that, no, actually, there are things in this world that may, in fact, be more important than just you. And it is our job as Jews to give up a little bit to ensure that those things are sustainable and that they thrive. And in fact, synagogue can be a place where this happens. It can be a place where, like Sir Francis Galton, we aggregate the community together so that we can have that perfect mean, that best of all of us together. But also, it can be a place where we are our best selves. So Malcolm Gladwell spoke here on Monday. Malcolm Gladwell spoke, and he was phenomenal. They asked the question of Malcolm Gladwell, what's so great about synagogues? And he said, well, a synagogue is a place where you can be your best self. He cited a study in which surveys were given about one child, and they were given to a parent, they were given to teachers, they were given to friends. Tell me about this kid. Tell me about Carl. Tell me about Carl. And the surveys all came back, and they were completely different. The teachers thought one thing, the parents thought another, the friends another. And it's not that Carl is so different that they didn't know him at all, but it's that we are slightly different versions of ourselves in different places. Malcolm Gladwell gave the example of saying, I'm different at work than I am at home, than I am at a bar at midnight. I'm a different person. And when we come to synagogue, the self that we get to try on is the best version of ourselves. We get to sit here and just think, what would it be to be the best Carl that I can be? What would that look like? Who would he be? And synagogue gives us that opportunity. And I want to say that Moshe wants us to think, as we're trying to be that best self, what if that best self was just a little bit less self? What if that best self was us taking time right now to think about who the people in our lives are that we love so much we would give up anything for them? Of who the organizations, who the nations, who the religions are in our lives that we love so much that we would lessen our own profit, our own benefit, our own who we are, so that they could be better. Because that is what Moshe reminds us this morning. That is what Sir Francis Galton wants us to do. And that is why we come here in synagogue today. For Moses, it was the Israelites. For me, my newborn son, my community, my planet. And what will it be for you? What do you love more than yourself? And how will you ensure its sustainability? Shabbat Shalom.